Hello everybody, this is Ben, and welcome to a timeline of the beginnings of discoveries on cellular respiration. Now this isn't what you're used to seeing on my channel. That's because I'm doing this as a submission for homework for biology class. The biology teacher, whose name I will not mention, but you know who you are, let's say no, will be watching this and judging it. Judgment. And so, without further ado, let's begin at the very beginnings, because that's where you begin. At the beginning, about cellular respiration, people knew nothing! We didn't know anything. All that we knew was that you had to breathe in, and eventually you had to breathe out. They didn't know what processes went on inside the cell. So, I'm going to be following 5 people who helped our model of this process, and I'm going to be representing some of their interactions with an interactogram. TM. This is a map of Europe, because all the people who I am following resided in Europe. They no longer do. Well, their bodies might, but they're dead, so they're not alive, in case you couldn't figure that out. So, anyway, let's begin with Joseph Priestley. He was born in Birmingham, and I'm going to very shortly show you another interactogram with him that'll chart that, in 1733. He was a teacher and a preacher. Well, how appropriate. He was very priestly. Aha, puns. He lived near a brewery, which, as will become very apparent very shortly, is important because from there he could get all manner of substances from which to test the gas coming out of them. And at that time, people just thought air was air, and there was no difference between the air in space, even though there is actually no air in space, besides just some stray hydrogen ions, and the air that we can breathe. He, using some substances from this brewery, isolated oxygen and 7 other gases. But he didn't call it oxygen at that time. He called it one moment, please.
Dephlogisticated.
Dephlogisticated. Yeah, thank you, Google. And he died in 1804. But let's chart this. Alright, so Birmingham. This is a very simple interactogram. As for the rest of this presentation, we'll have the initials of the person in the upper right, you see, and an asterisk to mark where it is. Birmingham is in England. And later in his life, for his religious views, a mob burnt down his house, and so he went to America. Because when people burn down your house, you leave and go to America, where that sort of stuff doesn't happen for the most part. Okay, next person who contributed vastly to our understanding of science is Antoine Laurent Lavoisier. It's French. He was born in Paris, 1743, so he would have lived at the time of Mr. J.P. He had a law degree, because that's what his family did. His father was a lawyer, and grandfather had experience in the law, but he preferred science. He did some work in geology, and eventually he got into the French science circles and became the manager of the Royal Gunpowder and Saltpeter Administration. The French probably called it something like l'Administration Royale de Gunpowder et Saltpeter, but that's just guessing. He was one of the first people to actually ascribe names to all these substances, such as oxygen. He named oxygen. And, what's even more important, was that he decomposed water into oxygen and hydrogen. Before, people just thought that, oh, here's water, it's entirely different from this oxygen that we now have a name for. But, also, due to religious views, he was beheaded in 1794. Now, let's check out his interactogram. Now, this is a more complicated interactogram, because it includes Mr. J.P. as well. Now, Joseph Priestley was in Birmingham, but Antoine was in Paris, and they liked to fight a lot. They didn't go beat each other up because they didn't live close to each other, but they argued over the mail. They would write about stuff and argue about all manner of things, most notably the deflognostication of oxygen. Now this guy is really important. Auguste Kekule. He's German. He was born somewhere in Germany, not entirely certain where, in 1829. Originally, he was studying architecture, but then he discovered, after sitting in a chemistry lecture for a while, that he loved chemistry and science! Although architecture is kind of science as well. He discovered that carbon can bond to multiple other atoms, and that also led to his discovery of the benzene ring. He died in 1896. But let's follow his path. This interactogram also has the paths of a few other people who influenced him. He went to the university at Gießen, and he was inspired to chemistry by Professor von Liebig. He then went to Paris, where he worked with Charles Gerhard, and then even later, he moved around England and did all manner of research. That's where he figured out the stuff about the benzene rings. And he worked with Alexander Williamson. Now, Louis Pasteur, you have most definitely heard this name. He was born in Dole, which is in France, le français, parlez-vous français, 1822, and he got a doctorate in chemistry. He started out as a chemist. As you might imagine, he invented pasteurization, and this was the process of heating up something really hot to kill all the bacteria, and then cooling it back down so it doesn't burn your tongue. He also saved the silk industry by testing for parasites, because at that time people didn't understand that something as little as a parasite, tiny little germ, could kill, damage, otherwise make sad a larger organism, such as humans. So he saved the silk industry by helping them remove the diseased population of silkworms. He also did experiments to disprove spontaneous generation, which is frequently used as a case of scientific inquiry. But, most relevant to our discussion here, he discovered anaerobic respiration, which is the ability of cells to have energy without oxygen for just a little while. He died in 1847, so he wouldn't have had any interaction with our first two people. As we said, University of Paris, and then he went to Strasbourg to study, and later he became a professor at Lille University. Now, Hermann Emil Fischer. This is the last of our five. He was also a German, auf Deutsch. He would have been a logger, as in, cutting down trees, if his father had had his way, but he persuaded his father to let him go to a university and study business. But he failed. He was not good at business. So instead, he became a chemistry person. And now, fortunately for everyone else, his father did okay him to study such things, and he thanked his father by discovering a lot of science. Oh, man. Such as the nature of enzymes. He was the one who figured out that you have a substrate and it fits just into only one type of enzyme. He also did a lot of work with sugars, such as glucose. We also might use his work, we might not know it, but those diagrams that we write on the board with the bonds, atoms, yeah, those are Fischer projections. Possibly, but probably not related to Bobby Fischer. And after he was diagnosed with cancer in 1919, he killed himself. Now, in this interactogram, he was inspired by Auguste Kekule at the University of Bonn. After that, he also studied at Strasbourg. Strauss, can't roll the R. And then later did some teaching and other studies at the University of Berlin. So, these are 5 people who started our understanding of the cellular respiration model. There obviously have been a lot more after this. this has been one of the most complicated problems of science, but we think we've got it pretty understood. If that makes any sense. I think it does. Pretty understood. So, these 5 men, 5-handedly, 10-handedly, advanced the science that shows us how our cells live and therefore how we live. If you enjoyed this presentation by BWACG, please press the like button or subscribe to get more content, although I don't imagine myself doing biology lectures very frequently. But you never know. Thanks for watching. Roll subscribers.